after you introduce me, I'll start with a couple of sentences to introduce all of the other speakers, and then I'll go into the very quick summary of the objectives, and then hand it back to you, and then you'll hand it to Wes, and we'll go in that progression. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Hi, Carol. Now I think I have audio.
Oh, perfect. And I do apologize for typing your name wrong. Oh, you've come in correctly with the correct
Yes,
spelling.
because
now.
I used my personal account.
Perfect.
And on my personal account, you had it right.
I am sorry. Okay.
No problem. It happens. Thanks.
Okay, and so you can all see my screen now?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Now you
Hi,
have...
everyone.
Carol, I just want to mention to the script that Ali Avilavud is still as panelist, not as organizer, which means you might not be able to control.
I'm going to change, now we've got him on audio, I will change that straight away. So it won't make really any difference what we're doing.
Okay, someone raise your hand so that I can see it.
As we're all organisers, I don't know that we can.
Okay.
No, but you will see them. They'll come up in yellow.
Okay.
Right now, okay.
I just saw John Clark. Okay, thank you, John.
Out of interest, John, can you see the screen now as well? Perfect. Thank you very much, John.
It's Dennis has control. That's a bad thing.
While we're all sitting here on mute, and as everyone can now hear us, just so you're aware, as participants to this call, there are now already 55 people on the call. We are expecting, a lot of people on this call, and everybody as default is muted as standard. If you have questions, we will repeat this during the session, but if you have any questions, please raise your hands. You should see a little button on the control panel to raise your hand, or please type in a question into the question display, and we'll keep that monitored, and we will come back to you as soon as we can to make sure that you do get a chance to ask questions, and we'll release the lines. Thank you.
So Carol will open it up and turn it over to you.
Benjamin Grossoff, hi. Looks like you're connected via voice over IP. Do you want to try speaking again, see if we can hear you clearly?
Hi, this is Benjamin.
Perfect, Ben. Wonderful.
No, that's not perfect because there's echo. So let me try just on phone and see if that works better.
When
Hold
you
on a minute, okay?
when you click to phone, you have to make sure you put the PIN number in, and then it will connect your line, and then you'll be heard.
Okay. It's not showing my PIN. I think I already put it in.
When you click to telephone, it should show you the PIN number.
Speakers, remember to tell me the next slide, please.
Can you hear me?
Benjamin, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, when I went to phone, it didn't work.
Right, okay, so you've clicked on telephone, all right?
I put the code in, it did not accept it. I don't know why.
Right.
146.
Okay, so...
Well, Carol, it should work without the PIN.
Okay, all right. Well, when you click to telephone under audio, all right, it will show you the phone number that you need to dial.
I'm dialed in.
No, you need to disconnect and do it completely because we upgraded you to organizer. So if you disconnect...
Okay, so I should phone in again?
Yes, and then you'll be able to put the PIN number in that it's asked you for.
So if you don't put the PIN number in, Carol, what happens?
As an organizer, you should be all right. You should just get straight through.
Okay.
All right, I'll try that right now.
Thank you, Benjamin. Tracy Helwig, you have raised your hand. Nope. Okay, that's fine.
David Wallace asked a question about slides. You go to the EDM Council website, you can download the slides there. You do that right now. It's on the first page on the right-hand side of the screen about halfway down.
Oh.
Benjamin, can we hear you now?
Let's try it now. Are you getting an echo? It sounds much better to me.
It sounds perfect.
I don't hear an echo at all, so it's fine.
Fantastic. All right, I think we're all set there.
Right, it is now 2 minutes past the hour. I'm assuming you want to give it just a few more moments for people to get connected in.
Paul Joseph, you just raised your hand.
Right. Good morning, good afternoon to everybody here. As we've now got quite a few people on the line, and we are 5 minutes past the hour, I think we should commence this call. Very, very quickly before we do, everybody can see the attendee list and the questions that are raised. If you have any questions, please be aware that your phones are automatically on mute, just so we don't get background noise on the call. So if you have questions, please type them into the chat session or type them into the questions section or raise your hand and we will then open your line and release it. I noticed there is 2 people already with hands raised, Paul Joseph and Jag. I'm not going to try and pronounce your name, I apologise. If there is something important, please put it into the chat or the questions and we will respond. I will hand over. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Mike Etkin. I'm the Managing Director of the Council. I just wanted to welcome you to this webinar. I'm very enthusiastic about what you're going to see here. The concept of ontology and common language is gaining traction everywhere. It's gaining traction at the right level for the right people. But when you combine common language with executable business rules, you really start to understand the potential of inference-based processing. So I'm going to ask you to pay close attention. This is what the future of linked risk analysis is going to look like. And if the U.S. scores a goal during this webinar, you are encouraged to shout out and cheer USA. So with that, let me turn it over to Dennis.
Okay, thank you very much. My purpose is simply to say how this begins and to remind you that if you can't get online, look at these slides, which will be changing in real time, to go to the EDM Council website. We had a technology summit in 2013, and we had 4 topics online there. In my opinion, the most important of those topics was what we're talking about today. Can we look at the complicated rules and regulations that we have and make sense of them through an ontology? So the team that was led by Benjamin Grossoff was on the call today, and David Newman decided that we would use Reg-W as a chosen proof of concept to see how this would work. I'm going to turn this over to David right now, who's going to start to make introductions to the people and carry it on from here.
Thanks a lot, Dennis. So, hi, this is David Newman from Wells Fargo. My role was to lead the team that developed and executed the proof of concept to invoke FIBO to test Reg-W along with the platforms that you'll hear about from the speakers. But first, I'd like to introduce some of the speakers. First is Wes Moore, who is Managing Director of Compliance Controls and Infrastructure Group at Wells Fargo Securities. Wes and his team maintain the program of controls that address the regulatory compliance risks across corporate and investing banking businesses. As financial reforms have expanded compliance activities and brought structural and strategic change to the banking industry, Wes has been working to identify opportunities to apply technology to increase productivity and automation in risk management programs. Also next is Dr. Eli Abilahoud, who incidentally just got back from his honeymoon to participate in this webinar. And Eli has been working on innovative technologies for enterprise solutions for the past 12 years. Since 2012, Eli is leading a multinational, multidisciplinary research team that is active in applying semantic technologies to governance, risk, and compliance in financial services at the Irish GRC Technology Centre, hosted by the University of College Cork in Ireland. Next up is Dr. Grit Denker, who is a senior computer scientist at SRI International. Grit has worked on semantic technologies since 2000, when the DARPA Agent Markup Program, GAML, began, which resulted in the standardization of the web ontology language, or OWL. Dr. Denker has applied semantic technologies in various application domains from cognitive policy-based software defined radios to military training, testing of net-centric systems, and multi-level security. Dr. Denker is co-leading the effort with Reg Ford from SRI. Next up is Dr. Benjamin Grossoff, who is the CTO and CEO of Coherent Knowledge Systems. Benjamin is also the creator of IBM's Common Rules and is co-architect of Rule ML. Benjamin has also been a professor at MIT and has also been the advanced AI program manager for Paul Allen. So next slide, Dennis. So basically the presentation you're going to hear is the description of this proof of concept effort. The mission here has been to demonstrate how we could deploy semantic technologies, particularly FIBO, and a semantic rule processing language called Flora2 or Rule-like, how these can be used to not only execute Reg-W, but in general to see how we could efficiently and automatically process regulatory compliance rules. So this was really a test to see not only Reg-W, but in general, how rules could be executed. So what we'll be doing is being able to identify Reg-W affiliates, covered transactions, prohibited transactions, and interestingly, we'll be able to play back the actual logic that was deployed in order to come up with whether the transaction was in compliance or not. So as part of this effort, Wells Fargo participated to provide the leadership of the POC, a group of subject matter experts from Wes Moore's team, and sample test data. The GRC Technology Center was involved for methodology and a controlled natural language, which you'll hear from Dr. Avi Lahoud. And then Grit Denker from SRI will talk about how Sunflower was used to fulfill the POC. And then lastly, we'll hear from Dr. Benjamin Grossoff from Coherent Knowledge Systems, who's going to demonstrate the Episto platform. So basically what each of the groups did was incorporated FIBO into their platforms for common business language and meaning. Then we pulled in some test cases based in spreadsheets to execute logic to determine whether the content in the spreadsheets representing transactions was compliant or not with Reg-W. And then lastly, we'll see the playback of logic. So I'm going to turn this back to Dennis now. Thanks.
Thank you, David. We're going to hold questions until we have the two actual demonstrations, which will be by PowerPoint. And then if there's time left over, at the end, Mike Atkin will handle questions. So Wes, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Thank you, everyone. This is Wesley Moore. I'm at Wells Fargo Securities, and as David explained, I am responsible for different aspects of our compliance program, including what you'll see today. What I'm going to do is take just a few minutes to go over very briefly what we do in a compliance department and what some of the specifics are that you'll see about Regulation W. Next slide. So a compliance department basically describes, finds, and helps correct regulatory and policy non-compliance. So in describing the rules and how they apply to our business, we write policies and procedures and interpret rules where necessary. We keep records of our decision-making in that process. We interact with examiners and auditors as they come in to defend our presentation and understanding in the program. We implement a system of compliance controls to ensure that the higher risk and medium risk regulations are adequately covered and in compliance. Much of that is a surveillance and monitoring program where we are doing like what we're doing in this demonstration, looking for transactions and identifying situations that may violate the rules. We then go about finding regulatory and policy non-compliance, and so we do a lot of oversight and execution of controls. We talk with our lines of business to ensure that they're performing their various supervisory duties, and we help resolve exceptions that we find and possible non-compliance. And then finally, we work very hard with the businesses to correct situations that may be non-compliant, including project support, validation of corrections, and then escalation of issues that can't get resolved timely. Next slide, please. So Reg-W is one of these areas of regulation where our compliance program has controls. Let me take a few minutes just to explain what Reg-W does. This is a regulation originating in 1933, designed to protect banks from their own possible bad behavior. Specifically, it limits the amount of credit that can be extended by a bank to certain of its affiliates. A bank affiliate in this case includes the company that controls the bank and any companies under common control with the bank and certain investment funds. The rule includes limits on covered transactions, credit transactions with affiliates that are not direct subsidiaries of the bank. It imposes collateral requirements on those extensions of credit that do occur, and it prohibits the purchase of low-quality assets by the bank. It imposes limits in the overall amount of capital that can be committed to credit for these certain affiliates. Covered transactions with a single affiliate may not exceed 10% of the bank's capital and surplus, and the total of transactions with affiliates cannot exceed 20% of the bank's capital and surplus. Okay, next slide. The types of covered transactions, certainly the last one, extensions of credit, straight loans would be included, but also asset purchases from affiliates, purchases of and investments in securities issued by an affiliate, and then any transactions with third parties that effectively extend credit to an affiliate would be among the types of covered transactions. And you'll see exemptions as well in here. Certain transactions are considered to be less risky and therefore exempt from this. Intraday credit to affiliates, riskless principal transactions where a broker is buying and selling securities very quickly. Municipal securities purchases are exempt. Transactions secured by cash and government securities are also considered safe enough to be exempt. And then purchasing assets that have a ready liquid market would be exempt transactions as well, unless those are securities issued by an affiliate. Okay, next slide. So just again quickly, what kinds of benefits we expect to compliance performance from the application of this type of technology. Certainly we think that we can fulfill our duty to have adequate controls over these regulatory requirements with clear policies and procedures, valid controls to ensure compliance, and to identify non-compliance. We'll do that by identifying and reporting covered transactions. We feel that the technology provides a degree, an improvement in the accuracy and accountability both for regulatory interpretations, the application of regulations in a bank's environment, and then accountability for the decisions made in interpreting regulations. We think that we'll have some benefit here by ensuring that we don't over-capitalize credit transactions because we'll have more precision in the analysis. We also, I think it will assist us in requesting the appropriate allocations of capital or collateral that we need for covered transactions, and provide the entire team, top to bottom in the organization, who care about Reg-W much greater insight to what's going on here. We'll also be able to report the daily commitment balances on all covered transactions for different business groups. We do feel that this provides an opportunity for greater understanding across the organization around this topic of Reg-W. We will change the way we do develop and perform testing to ensure Reg-W compliance, again, because of the accuracy of the logic, the continuous monitoring, and the proximity to events. We think that this will improve our control environment. And then finally, under the last category, training team members, we think that will improve preventive control of violations as well by making the rules more clear, consistent, and also providing an improved feedback loop for subject matter experts to communicate with technology in identifying exceptions. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to Eli Abilahoud.
Hi everyone, my name is Ali Abilahoud and I'm in Ireland in University College Cork working for the GRC Technology Center. On to slide 14. So this slide is animated and just a quick recap from Wes and David's slides. When a bank enters in a transaction with a counterparty, in order to assert compliance with the regulation W, one needs to answer 3 questions. Is the counterparty an affiliate? Question number 2, is this transaction covered or not? Question number 3, is the amount permitted? For this proof of concept, the objective was to answer 2 types of questions. Am I in compliance with the regulation W? So given a data set, one needs to assert if yes or no we are in compliance. And one wants to understand why or why not. In order to do that and to build an application around it, we would start with understanding regulation W. Regulation W comes in a big unstructured text. You have around 150 pages in English. The summary is only 19 pages. And this is only one challenge. On from that, this is an example of the text. You can see first in the bottom part of the screen that there are references to other texts. So reference change is another challenge. And you can see that there are definitions that go from a document to another. One needs to identify, delimit, and flesh out these definitions and make sure to understand the legalese and the complexities of natural language. Current techniques rely on subject matter expertise and subject matter experts to handcraft guidance based on non-formalized processes. Often, this guidance have a partial coverage of the regulation and its accuracy, thoroughness is left at the discretion of the subject matter expert. Let's take a look at the screen. Next, please. So this is a text. They take it and on from it, they produce something like the spreadsheet that you will see in a second, where on the left-hand side, you will see the subject matter expert understanding of the regulation restituted in their own way. Then on the right-hand side, you see 3 columns. Each column contains actually the type of the things we are talking about, but these categories are arbitrary, they lack structure, they don't have clear, accurate definitions across the enterprise. And then you see on the right-hand side, few numbers. These numbers are the links that tell you which bullet point is actually the bullet point from the reg that this refers to. So you can see a lot of difficulties in terms of traceability or usability across the enterprise. Obviously, more problems arise when you are talking about a complex rule or more than one rule. Next slide, please, Dennis. So what we are suggesting here is a methodology, not a platform like my colleagues will show you later, but rather a methodology that uses structured natural language following the GRCTC protocol to interpret regulations in SBVR. SBVR is an object management group specification that stands for Semantics of Business Vocabulary and Business Rules. Basically, if you follow our process and you apply this methodology using SBVR, you will end up with 2 things. A vocabulary that contains concepts about your business and relationships between them, both defines, and then the rules about the business or the regulation, in this case, captured in terms of the previous vocabulary. We follow, as I said, a clearly defined process. You are more than welcome to discuss it, review it online, and come back to us. On to slide 19. And we end up with something like this. For the concept of affiliate, that is a cornerstone for regulation W, you would have a list of attributes. defined. All the attributes are not shown here. Two important attributes, actually three, are shown here. The first one is a set of definitions, then the source where it comes from, and then a link to a FIBO concept, where it says here an affiliate in the context of this POC for regulation W is a FIBO body corporate. In the definition of affiliate, you see a list of elements, companies or companies under control being affiliates. Obviously, each of these in green are defined, and in their turn, every definition is then redefined. On to slide 19. 21. No, slide 20 is another example. Slide 21 tells you that not only we define the terms in the vocabulary that underlie the regulation, but we also define the relationships, such as the relationship of control between two entities here. Once the definitions are done, we go back, like you see on slide 22, and we restitute the regulatory intent by reconstructing the sentences from the vocabulary that has been defined now. You end up with something like what you see on the screen, where everything in green and in blue is defined. Slide 23 contains another example, and slide 24 concludes my talk with the following 3 bullet points. What we've done here is we've taken, like on the left-hand side, a limited scope of the regulation and applied the process that I described in several iterations. Every iteration allows us to go deeper in understanding, but also widen the scope beyond the original selected scope, obviously because we are following up references. We end up with a clearer and a better understanding. So what we've done is we provided the discipline and the structure to render the regulatory requirements explicit and articulated in a transparent way. By transparency, we mean provenance in terms of links to the original text, but also in terms of identifying the agent, the lawyer, or the compliance officer who actually created these statements. Thank you very much. I will hand on now to my colleague, Grit.
Thank you, Ali. I'm Grit Denker from SRI International, and I will give you a presentation about how we use SRI's sunflower technology to do advanced compliance controls and automate controls. Next slide, please. So Sunflower is a software solution that implements compliance programs, and it will run on your hardware, and it will do machine reasoning over these government regulations, and your data, both of them are captured in machine understandable representations. Before I go into the Reg-W POC that we did, let me give you an overview of how Sunflower supports the compliance program lifecycle. The regulations and related laws and PNPs are being investigated. The other slide back, please. 26. The regulations and backward, please, Dennis. Backward. Are being investigated and understood and then formalized into policies and regulations and rules, and data is being identified in the creation step. In the implementation step of the compliance program lifecycle, we implement then in Sunflower the controls and tests that are being run over this data. And we finally also automate the data ingestion. And now you have essentially the rules in a format that you can share them, as well as the information. And at the execution state, the information is being, the protection data is being ingested, and then the analysis being run over it so that reports are being provided. So we started for Reg-W with the scenario spreadsheets that you saw before. We had 17 of those. And next slide, please. We investigated them and worked with the Wells Fargo subject matter experts. Next slide. And we made out of these various cases under which the Reg-W transaction is covered or not, which depends mostly on whether you have who is the issuer, who is the counterparty, whether it is what kind of market and underwriter. Essentially, out of these cases, we made a rule for each of these lines, a floor rule in Sunflower. Next, please. The other input that we got from Reg-W are this fictitious trade data. So here I show you 5 of those. What we get for each of the trade data, actually information about what firm was involved, what was it a buy or sell, what was the capacity, the trade price, and so on. And we're using Sunflower's ingestion tools. We have them for spreadsheets importer as well as SQL database importer. And we ingest this into Sunflower. So next slide, please. So in Sunflower, this is a view of the Sunflower tool as somebody with some semantic technology training will be presented in it. Next, please, the animation. And what you see here on the left-hand side is a set of all the projects and all the knowledge bases, all the information transactions, as well as ontologies that are being imported. So you see a FIBO directory there, as well as down there a FIBO-OWL-DN. That was the David Newman gave us the OWL ontologies. And on the right-hand side, on the lower side, you see all these tabs. These are integrated views that show you a variety of things of how you can look at the information. It's you can browse the knowledge, you can see graphical views of the rules and how they depend on each other, and also have views of the test queries that you can run and execute on the results. One more animation, please. And there's also a view of the Flora itself for those that are more have more training. However, the end user interfaces will be built on top of that, or will be limited to some of these views in the tabs. Next slide, please. So we did not start in Reg-W with doing our ontologies. As we said, we started with FIBO. You essentially have a way of translating any OWL ontology or Swirl ontologies into Flora. It takes a couple of seconds, and you have and accordingly an overview of the Flora files in the Sunflower. Next, please. On the basis of these ontologies, we then can use our importer. In this case, we used the spreadsheet of Reg-W and imported these transaction instances that were given to us. What you see here is the ontology editor, and it shows you with these green circles all the classes, like the transaction class Reg-W hash transaction class, and underneath all the individuals marked with these little icons of individuals. On the right-hand side, you see for each of this individual all the properties. For instance, can you go back, please? In the individuals properties table, you see that transactions have assets. They have whether it's they say whether it's a buy or sell, what capacity, and so on. But note that you do not have their information about whether they are transmitted or that we are, of course, inferring with the reasoner tool. Next, please. So now we have all the information in Sunflower. We have the ontologies. On top of the ontologies, we import all the data. We have the rules as floor rules. And the last thing that we do is we define queries which answer questions that compliance officers have to look at. In particular, the query, of course, which of these transactions are permitted and reportable. You see a list of queries that we have to find, and I highlighted one, the show all relevant properties for each transaction. And this is a test query that applies the Reg-W rules in Flora to all of the transaction data that we were given and determines for each of them whether the transaction is permitted or not and whether it's reportable or not. And if you execute this query, it takes about a second per transaction. Next slide. And as a result, you get a table like this that tells you for every single transaction whether it's permitted, yes or no, whether it's reportable, and what is the reportable reason. One of the things that we think might be useful thing to do for a compliance officer is sometimes to compare these results. So if you have changes in the data and want to rerun your analysis, or you want to try out hypothetical scenarios, what you can do in Sunflower is you can save these results as again, spreadsheets, or you can save it as comma-separated value lists. And we did that, we saved that, and then I can go into the editor and change any value in there. In this case, I chose to change for the ABC Bank, which is the firm involved in this transaction, the capital stock and surplus from 8 million to 4 million. And of course, because that is the property that's being checked for the overall transaction limit, it will have an effect. So next slide, please. Now, the compliance officer can go back and re-execute the same query and then compare the results by just reloading the old results spreadsheet. And what he gets is this output. He gets a table in which everything that's bold-faced is a change with respect to the previous results, and everything that's italicized and grayed out is what the previously was one there. So the first one you see there, the B5634, Of course, this boldface, it's no longer permitted. It was permitted because we lowered the capital stock and surplus. Next, please. So what we can do so far is we can run queries and ask ourselves, for various kinds of things, what transactions are permitted and reportable. Now, often it is much more important to not just see the results, but also understand why you get this result. Particularly in cases where maybe a compliance officer says, I'm suspecting that this is a false positive, and there must be something wrong in the underlying rules. How can I figure out what happened? So here in this example, is the transaction B5634 reportable and why? I run the query again. I get the answer no. The reason is ready market. And behind every result, we get this question mark. And you can press this question mark button, and it gives you this English explanation that you see on the bottom. So here it says the transaction is not reportable because of ready market. And behind it says it uses a certain rule, the reportable rule. So it points out when it came to a result because of a rule. And you see this little triangle that's opened. And in a hierarchical fashion, I give now underneath or the tool gives underneath all the reasons that constitute together a reason why they came to this result. So the first reason is the firm that was engaged was the ABC Bank, and that's a fact. So somebody stated that. So it's actually in the transaction data. And the asset that was traded was CVS Care. And if you look a bit further down, you see another triangle that says the asset CVS Care is actually corporate debt. And here it uses, again, another rule, the asset class rule, to determine that. So the reasoning is such that either it comes down at a leaf level to some facts that are stated, or it uses rules. And I could, of course, open up more of these triangles to come down to facts that are somewhere stated, which gives me a provenance chain about why this is so. If I want to understand more, so it's not enough to just see this. I want to say, what's this rule like? I can double click on this rule. And what I get there is one way I can see it, just a paraphrase of this rule. So here is a paraphrase of this rule that was used for the ready market rule that says essentially that you have a non-affiliate issuer, a secondary market, the asset is corporate debt, and it's actively traded, and it's not listed as principal. Then again, if this seems to be the right rule, but yet the result is not what I want to have, I can actually further inspect it by doing various things. I can automatically navigate to the definition of the rule in our tool, or you can also navigate to a graphical representation of the rule structure. And I gave you here an example for the reportable and why rule, where you can see it says that it depends on 3 other rules. It checks whether it's an intraday pair, it's issued by the affiliate, and it checks the asset class. So you kind of get an overview and can drill further down from each of these rules. How's the rule put together overall? Next, please. So in summary, for Sunflower, what we have is a software that gives you transparent compliance decision making, and it gives you provenance of these controls, because for all the results also, it gives you a rationale in English why you get a certain result. And you can chain yourself through the evidence and go back to facts that are stated somewhere. So as a compliance officer, if there are any problems, you either can see that the problem might have arisen from the data itself, or sometimes it's because the rules were not captured correctly and need to be changed, or new interpretations need to be considered. Now, we automatically ingest data from spreadsheets and other kinds of databases. And together what you have is a uniform way of expressing the regulations as well as the transactions. And you can share this actually across the enterprise, which helps you to uniformly have your different compliance programs work with each other. And I would be happy to give live demonstrations. If people are interested, we are happy to do that in follow-up sessions. Thank you very much. I'm giving it on to Benjamin.
Actually, great. We have time for a couple of questions. If anyone would like to raise their hand and ask a question, please.
Dennis, there was a question.
Okay, I don't see any questions.
Sorry, Dennis, there are a couple of questions on the question panel.
Okay, I see.
Thank you.
Okay, I see that now. I see James Benedict. Let's go to the top. James? You're unmuted.
I was wondering, if Sunflower produces or provides a data lineage for audit trail. helps for traceability?
Yes, it could provide that on top of the explanations, also the data lineage. Yes, you can put together where the different data pieces come from.
Okay, thank you. Robert Hausman.
Presentation.
Robert.
Thank you. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Interesting presentation. Thank you. As somebody noted in the questions, it did go by very quickly, but there's a lot of great information in there. First question is, does Sunflower facilitate the creation of downstream business rules that once you've identified these, for example, these transactions, that you can then write business rules against it to determine if you have the capital available or the collateral available, whatever, to be able to offset that so basically pull in information from another system and do that evaluation?
Yes, you could write that also as essentially having, once you have determined the results of one analysis, to a further processing, as you said, and look into and say, like, given this result, what other kinds of information can I pull in, whether I can, have other capital. So yes, you can formalize these as well.
So two other quick, well, actually, just one other quick question in the interest of time, Grit. Does this software, if a bank were to engage with you, remain proprietary, or does the bank, can the bank take it and extend it, do what it needs to do with it, or basically does it continue to be owned and run and licensed by Sunflower?
There are various kinds of deals that we are considering. In particular, we are looking into open sourcing part of the tool. And then there might be parts that we want to license also. But the idea would be that you want to transition this into the bank so that the subject matter experts can deal with it there and essentially make the changes there. We want to after training.
Okay, thank you very much. And Harsh, I unmuted you and got a whole lot of feedback, so we're going to take your question offline. Let's move to Benjamin next for the Coherent presentation.
Hi, this is Benjamin Grossoff from Coherent Knowledge Systems. We're a startup that was founded by the people who designed the Flora technology and then have extended it to an approach called textual rule log. We'll be talking about how that especially facilitates making the operations of the system and the explanations for the rationale behind its decisions as accessible as possible to people who are not IT experts, either who are subject matter experts or who are involved in just using the system for compliance decisions operationally day to day. Next slide, please. So the problem today in this area of automating decision support around compliance of regulations and policies for financial and also a number of other realms is that the current methods are pretty expensive and unwieldy and often inaccurate. The state of the art is to use techniques such as business rule technology that actually dates back about 30 years in combination with databases, namely production rule or event condition action rules technology. The solution approach that we and also that SRI and that GRCTC, LE, and GRIT were talking about starts with regulatory and related information as complex information stated in natural language, in English. And then there's a process which, with automated support, but with human labor involved, encodes that information into semantic rules and ontologies, but this is not your grandfather's Oldsmobile kind of thing. These are very powerful types of logical statements that go beyond the sort of first generation semantic technology that was standardized in OWL. In particular, it enables one not only to automate the decisions and the querying, but to provide explanations in as much detail as one wants in a quite user-accessible way, something that people who come from the compliance side, not just from the IT side, can understand. And then they can be involved in a tight loop and have an audit trail with provenance back to the source statements, going not just to the encoded logical statements, rules, and facts that were used to derive a particular decision or answer to a query, but also the source material back in English or hypertext documents, such as the regulatory issued documents that Ellie mentioned earlier, say the 19-page summary, which we did a lot of encoding starting from in this particular pilot. Now, this helps handle the increasing complexity of the challenges in compliance around the scope and the heterogeneity of the data and the systems that are integrated. And also a key thing, whenever you're doing stuff around legal, regulatory, policy kind of information and decision making, is that different regulations or policies have exemptions, they have exceptions, they have special cases. In short, they conflict with each other. And this new logical textual rule log technology, of which Flora is a subset, and the Sunflower UI and environment provides access to a subset of, is very capable in dealing both with the integration aspect, which Grit talked about how you can ingest from a variety of types of sources the data, but also ingest from a variety of different, more complex kinds of structured information, such as ontologies and schemas and database views, and older generations of semantic technology and business rules and AI technology. But even beyond that, it enables one to do this in a way which is accessible for both the encoding process and the usage and understanding process by people who come from the compliance side. In other words, who are subject matter experts to some degree or less. Now, the advantages compared to these currently deployed methods are, first of all, often much greater accuracy. And this is one of the interesting things that we learned about during the pilot from some of the experience of Wells and other people coming from the financial industry side on this. It also makes for more cost effectiveness because the encoding process using this powerful logical and natural language processing methods requires a lot less effort to encode the information, to validate it, to extend it as new regulations are issued or new exception cases are discovered or new judgments are made, and to do training around some of the broader set of tasks that Wes Moore from Wells talked about earlier. It makes for more agility because it's quicker to update the operational version of the knowledge base and more overall effectiveness, therefore, in terms of reducing exposure to risk of noncompliance. Next slide, please. So here we see the Episto platform. We start, as we've been talking about, from complex information over in the upper right-hand side in the form of English text and policy docs or regulatory documents and related sorts of things. And then that information is encoded in the form of assertions and also persistent queries or query templates into a knowledge base which runs on top of an engine, part of which is an open source kernel, XSB Prolog, and then a number of external services and components down in the lower middle provide access to not only transaction data, but other kinds of supporting or contextual data, view definitions, various kinds of simpler business rules or semantic rule technology, which the Coherent team has been very involved in creating the standards for and is very familiar with, I might add, myself being one of those people, and as well as the schema and ontology information that OWL is an example of. And then applications can be exposing their data through Java Web Service or C interfaces. And moreover, this decision engine over on the left, when queries are run, answers are generated, explanations are generated, views are updated, can also trigger actions or events such as sending notifications or interacting with another system, say even to real-time reallocate capital. Moving on to the next slide. Here's an example query. It's our kind of query here. What proposed transactions are prohibited by Reg-W? And we see here down below that a question. You'll notice, first of all, no, go back, please. Go back on the slide, please. Yeah. You'll see down here below on this second line, there's a particular answer. This is a fictitious test data subset, with a transaction that's been kicked out. It's prohibited. And we can right-click on it and ask why. Next slide, please. So the user is able to progressively expand on a initially high-level course kind of explanation to progressively elaborate different aspects. And it's under the user's control. Next slide, please. So for example, one part of the explanation that one could drill down on is why is this transaction, why is the counterparty an affiliate? Well, that was concluded that Maui Sunset is an affiliate of Pacific Bank because Hawaii Bank is an affiliate of Pacific Bank and Maui Sunset is advised by Hawaii Bank. So under the regulation, the usual notion of affiliate is not just what's used. It's also a notion of if you're advised by what is traditionally viewed as an affiliate, then you too are an affiliate as far as being covered by the regulation and subject to its risk limitations, etc. Moving on, next slide. Another portion of the explanation that one can drill down on here, the second key question that we talked about earlier in the overall presentation is why is this transaction viewed as covered by the regulation? So it's not just that it's with an affiliate, but it's of a type, it's a proposed loan we see here on the fifth line from Pacific Bank to Maui Sunset. Moving on, next slide. We see here that one can drill down on yet another aspect. Why was this amount of the transaction not permitted? Well, there's a limit of 10 million for any proposed covered transaction that is covered by the regulation by Pacific Bank with Maui Sunset. And the proposed amount of 23 mil is more than the limit of 10 million. Moving on, next slide. Then we can drill down also to find out, okay, where did that limit come from? Well, there's a limit because there's something called an aggregated affiliates limit of 10 million. And why is that? Where does that come from? The aggregated total of previous covered transaction by Pacific Bank across all its different affiliates is 490 million, and the maximum threshold, next line, is 500 million. But where did that 500 million threshold, not next slide, next line, sorry. The capital of the bank is 2,500 mil, and remember there is a 20% threshold percentage that was mentioned earlier by Wes Moore about from the regulation across the total set of affiliates. So that's where the 10 million came from. Now we've satisfied our curiosity. We've been able to expand the explanation as much as we wanted to see. And we saw here that that was made available in natural language in a easy to understand, structured way. A live demo would have showed this off even better than with screenshots because we would have been able to see the progressive steps in expanding the explanation. Let's move on. Next slide, please. So also, we're able to very tightly integrate information that comes not originally from RULOG, but OWL. Here is a little snippet from a big file of about over 10,000 axioms that were pulled in that had FIBO ontology and sample data. And it's talking in particular about a property wholly owns and controls, which is defined in a precise logical sense in this ontology. Now, interestingly, move on, next slide, that corresponds to things in English. And so, unfortunately, we don't have time to go into how the bridging is done between the logic and the English here. But here's an example of how the inferencing, and we'll shortly see also the explanation, tightly integrate and fully support the use of information in OWL from FIBO or other types of sources. So here, there's a sample query, who owns and controls whom in the FIBO sense, stated in English. And then next screen, next slide, please. We can look at an answer and ask for its explanation. Next slide, please. And that, when we drill down in the explanation, as we were doing a little while ago, we see one of the pieces of information is part of the OWL ontological information, not just transaction data, talking about wholly owns and controls being the inverse of another property, etc. Next slide, winding up. So to recap, there are several major advantages compared to the currently types of deployed compliance methods. Greater accuracy, cost effectiveness, agility, involvement of the subject matter experts, accessibility to them to be involved in learning, deploying new regulations, as well as dealing with existing ones and contributing to the overall ongoing development of the capabilities operationally within an enterprise. This is very highly standards-based. We were not able to get into that in detail, but we're based on the latest, greatest semantic technology and connect very well to database standards as well. It uses powerful rule-based AI, this textual rule log approach overall, and extends FIBO OWL, provides this proof or audit trail step by step. And if you'd like a live demo or to understand more how this would apply to in more detail to particular aspects of compliance, to other areas of financial services, or even beyond, please feel free to contact us at Coherent. Our team has designed Flora and developed a lot of the standards in this area, and we're very open, very oriented toward open architectures. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ben. We have time for a couple of questions. I see Benny Nissan hand raised.
Hello?
Yes. A lot of echo, Benny. Please.
Let's see if we can fix that echo. This is for Ben.
Hi.
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, Ben, this is Doug Reichen. Been a while since we've had a chance to think together. Two things for a colleague of mine here. One was when you were talking about the expressiveness to generate explanations. Were you generating that with a simple natural language component that was just parsing the RDF graph, predicates, nouns, etc.? Or were you parsing definitions that were embedded in the FIFO model itself and stringing them together?
Okay, well, I think the easiest way to think about it is there are two key aspects. One is that logical statements are mapped using actually logical statements into natural language to do automatic generation of the explanations. Secondly, there is bridging done in the logical assertions in the knowledge base that are not directly involved in natural language generation, that bridge between different ways of phrasing information. So essentially, the textual rule log approach is a very tight and close relationship between a phrase in English, in natural language, and a logical expression known in logic as a term. So there were both statements that bridged between the FIBO logical ontology to a more naturalistic formulation that uses words as logical constants, and then a separate step of generating English for the paraphrasing that appeared in the explanations.
Okay, thank you very much, Benjamin. We're coming close to the end of our hour here, so I'm going to turn this back over to Mike Atkin for his closing comments and thoughts.
Thank you, Dennis. So I think that this is really just a sample of the kinds of potential that you can use to align ontology with executable business rules, with subject matter knowledge of application. I think my question is, well, my final comment is really a question for you, Dennis, which is, as you watched this activity be formulated, what was the biggest obstacle that we need to think about in terms of making this activity operational to align business rules with sunflower type of processing with FIBO? Was there anything we learned in this process that we would kind of take forward for the next step?
We learned that this can actually work. Some of us had no doubt, but it takes a team, and having Wells Fargo, having Wesley Moore who could answer questions instantly, and the people who he brought to the table, along with the people like Benjamin and Grant and the others on their teams who have a tremendous amount of experience. Ellie coming in with a different point of view that's totally standards-based with a lot of pre-work done. I believe that the stage is set for continuing this within the financial community in real-world applications internally for members of the council.
John, go ahead. Yeah, question?
Dennis, how are you? It's John Bottega here. The work that was done
in applying to Reg-W, I would assume that many of the attributes, both product and entity attributes, could be applied to other regulation, right? Without remake, right? I mean, it's fungible across the different regs. So curious to see how much effort it would take, say, to apply this to a FATCA requirement based on the work already done.
Well, the bankers can answer that one better than I can. The thing we pick to start with, and I would encourage going forward, is that Reg-W is very mathematically based. It is or it isn't. And that takes the judgment of interpretation of the answer that comes back right out of the equation. It is or it isn't. So any regulation that we can answer that question mathematically, we could replace the word Reg-W with whatever that is and use exactly the tooling that you've seen in this presentation today. And
so once mapped, you could apply the semantics around, say, product and entity to any new set of rules without having to redo that mapping, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the mapping has to be done between the regulation and the software that interprets
the structure is there.
Sure, but the underlying structure is repeatable.
Right.
All right, so I know we're running at the end of our hour. I wanted to say three quick things. One, this is recorded, I believe. It will be available for folks to look at again or to onward refer via the EDM Council website. If you have questions about this and you want to get access to any of the people, besides contacting them directly, I'm going to encourage you to go through Dennis. He will be happy to arrange for an independent evaluation of FIBO and our business rules activity. And then finally, I wanted to thank Benjamin and David, Ellie, Grit, Dennis for all of the work that they did to put this together. It was terrific illustration. So thank you guys very much, and we'll call our webinar concluded.
Thank you all very much. This is quite exciting, and hope to continue working with you as we go forward.